Hey classes, welcome back. If you check out the board behind me, we've got the key terms and what we're doing this week, and also just kind of a recap of where we've been and where we're going. So let's jump right in with the assignments. The assignments for this week are our optional extra credit, which is out there through the 30th. Remember, it's optional and it can only help your grade. It can't hurt it, so make sure you give it a shot. The weekly quiz will be put out there on Wednesday afternoon, as usual, and it'll be due by the end of the day on Friday. And then finally, our spot check this week is a little bit different. You're using the floppy books, those HMH books. We're using pages 45 through 46, which is a pretty good recap of some of the things that we've done with polymers. So jumping into polymers, on Wednesday of this week, we've got Science from Scientists coming. The Science from Scientists, of course, are our visitors that come and show us a little bit of what they're doing in their field. This week, they're going to be making silly putty with the class. Silly putty is a good example of polymers in action. We get to take some of the things like borax and some glue and some of the other things that we put together and see what we make with different plastics. Now, plastics have kind of been an ongoing theme through the course of the year so far. And to jump on in, we had some students collecting some plastics around school. In other words, plastics like this. These were some of the beads that we had from around school. These in particular, now there's plastics all over the place. We always try and pick up the big pieces of plastic that we find around. But just this week, we had a big storm. We had a big storm over Friday, Saturday, this weekend, Sunday. And a lot of this stuff, of course, is getting washed out to the ocean. I remember going out there on Sunday and you see the San Pedro Creek dumping into Linamar Cove. And these in particular have exactly the size and shape of fish eggs, and so we're really trying to make sure we collect the microplastics, the little things that fish will eat, and they look like food sources to the fish, and of course, they can't be digested. Now, if you look at the key terms, I'm going to back up a little bit here. We started with the brain pop. Wanted to talk about when were plastics, artificial plastics, first put on the market. Invented around 1907. This is the first one that they consider with Bakelite, the actual first synthetic plastic that was out there. And the last century has seen plastics hitting the market, and many of those plastics are still out there somewhere. They're in a landfill or they're in our oceans. So with our 7th grade standards, especially with biology, we want to be mindful that that is one of the reasons we're studying plastics, partly to learn about chemistry, partly to learn about environmental stewardship. And really, we want to understand going forward, how can we make some plastics that are not harmful to the environment, not harmful to our ocean ecosystem. For example, one of our terms this week is the North Pacific Gyre. This is a large area between here and Hawaii, between here and Pacifica and Hawaii, that tends to collect into a big sort of gyre or whirlpool type shape. All of the plastics that litter the ocean. There have been some efforts. We saw that on CNN 10 with Mr. Westbrook's class. We'll talk about Mr. Westbrook here again in a second, where they're trying to actually go out and physically clean up that. It's best if, of course, we can clean up before it gets there, but every little bit helps. This right here, I'm going to pick this up. This is a toy I kept from when my kids were little. This particular toy is made with a type of plastic that's biodegradable. It's actually made from a corn byproduct. And you can feel when we passed around the class today that it doesn't feel exactly like your usual plastics, like this plastic container here. It has a different, slightly different feel to it. Those are the types of plastics that we're hopefully moving towards in terms of the consumer plastics, because as I set this over there, the whiteboard's a perfect example. When I was a kid at school, we used to use good old chalkboards. I still have a chalkboard in the back of the classroom. I like to use it for a lot of side notes and just for things that I'm trying to keep track of. Things like this, my Expo pen. Yeah, we all use whiteboards, but when you pick up these pens and they go dry on you, you've got yet another piece of plastic in the environment. And it's really difficult to try and keep a track on those. Moving forward, we have our key terms, and there's a lot of crossover with ones that we've had before. We should see protein, amino acid, petroleum. That's been up there. Remember, petroleum products, we'll pick those up. Coal, oil, and gas. This particular lump of coal came from my grandfather's backyard in West Virginia. And if you've got, he was a coal miner, he had some coal, some old pieces of slag back there. And if you check out this piece of coal right now, a bunch of carbon compounds. Plastic is a petroleum product. We make modern plastics with petroleum, a non-renewable resource. And again, we're getting into some of the reasons why we're studying it in class. One of the kind of through subjects that kind of we keep coming back to again and again, and particularly because of my background with earth science, We do a lot with earth science and geology, and so you'll notice that one of the key terms that's sitting up here is the law of superposition. That one seems to be kind of like sitting separate. That's why there's a little asterisk next to it. We did have a little bit on the law of superposition when we did a little bit on the rock cycle. And again, it simply tells us that when we look at stripes of rocks, sedimentary rock, the only rock in which we find fossils, you will notice that the older fossils are on the bottom, the younger ones are on the top. One of the reasons we keep coming back again to earth science, I kind of see earth science as the hub that kind of everything connects to with life science and physics and engineering. One of the reasons we come back to again and again is it gives us a lot of the evidence for natural selection, descent with modification according to Darwin. And it's a wonderful way to kind of bookmark or bookend the class. We kind of start with a little bit of earth science, we kind of end with a little bit of earth science, and we kind of weave it through the whole course. This particular piece of rock right here, granite, you won't find granite, you won't find fossils in granite because, of course, it's an igneous rock. Any fossils that would have been there have been sort of baked out of it. Getting to granite, that particular piece comes from the High Sierra. And I mentioned that because at one point in class today I mentioned backpacking with my brother. My brother and I, he's a little bit older than me. He used to take me backpacking when I was much younger, still does. We still go up and try and hit the High Sierra together. And I remember when I was really young going backpacking with him, 17, 18 years old. We went up there and I came across, it was way up near Mammoth. And we got what I considered, at that age, really far back in the Sierra, came across one of those plastic, blow-up mattresses that someone had brought up there and it popped, and they had left it way up there in the forest. I thought, at that age, I'm the first person ever up there, then you find this old plastic mattress. Not knowing yet, I should not have done this. This was a mistake on my part. We had a campfire going. I thought, well, I'll get rid of this instead of packing it out. I was just a kid at the time. I tossed it in the fire. It wasn't very big, but it put up plumes of black smoke. Not a great idea. Plastic, that was a good example of plastic is really hard to get rid of. When you burn plastic, it puts out a lot of toxic chemicals. Recycling plastic, it keeps getting recycled and recycled, but eventually it gets to the point where it doesn't get recycled anymore. Again, you're talking about a substance that is wonderful because it's durable, but that also makes it a little more difficult to deal with because it's so durable. So that's one of the things that we're going to be coming back to. And again, Science from Scientists on Wednesday is going to be talking about this a little bit in the class. For our purposes also, I'm going to the next screen here a second, we're talking about amino acids, polymers, and when we are talking about amino acids, if I could throw that over the right distance, this part of the notes today, the second part of the notes today, was basically a recap. We, of course, being part of the animal kingdom, just like the fungi kingdom and the protist kingdom and the plant kingdom, are eukaryotic. Our cells are eukaryotic, meaning they have a true kernel, they have a nucleus. And when you're looking at our nucleus, you've got the DNA residing in there. One of the analogies that we come across a lot in this class, and I was using it here, I'm going to reach over here again to get one of my props, was encyclopedias. I keep an old set of encyclopedias here. In my day, this was our Google. And if you check out the encyclopedias on the shelf, I've got a set of about 29 encyclopedias over there. We used to collect these once per week, I remember back in the old days. And I love having a set of encyclopedias in the class. If you think of the information contained in an encyclopedia like DNA, the DNA has the information, the blueprint, again, they use that term quite a bit, the blueprint for how you make the proteins, how a cell makes the proteins, but it's just sitting in the nucleus. What you need is some way to get it from the nucleus out to the rest of the cell. We're just focusing on a few organelles. I know last week we went through all the organelles of a cell very, very quickly. Really just want to focus on the ribosomes for the most part and a little bit about RNA, which isn't an organelle, but you've got this molecule that looks like a half piece of DNA, RNA. RNA essentially goes in and talks to the nucleus. It essentially goes in and says, okay, nucleus, can you tell me, please, how are we supposed to make this protein? Because remember, cells are like little factories, and they're little factories that, for the most part, make proteins. They do other things as well, but for the most part, they're making some type of protein for the body. DNA has all the information to do that. RNA is doing all the legwork. It's actually running in there and checking it out. It looks like a half a piece of DNA, but remember, we went through that DNA has an A and a T that always pair together, and a C and a G. These are the runs, the base pairs that always pair up. Please look back on last week's notes if you're not sure about that. And by knowing how they pair up, the RNA can check out the DNA, go out to the rest of the cell, visit the ribosome, and it says, hey, ribosome, this is how we put together the particular protein that we're supposed to make. What does the ribosome do? It links together a bunch of smaller parts, monomers. We call them amino acids. And with those amino acids, it makes the proteins that make us, that whatever the protein that cell is supposed to make, it uses the DNA as the blueprint. The RNA tells the ribosome what to do, and the ribosome links these together and does it. When you look at amino acids, science has identified about 500 types of amino acids, but only 20 really. 22, it depends on what particular molecules you're looking at, but basically 20 amino acids get together to make all of the proteins in our bodies, which is stunningly amazing when you really think that we are made of these monomers, these small units that link together to make all the proteins that make us. Very, very often they're compared with Legos. Legos are another good example, also made with plastic, by the way. But Legos are a great example because you can think about Legos as linking together. You can have a couple of them linked together, or you can link hundreds or thousands of them together. Not unlike amino acids. You can take just a few, link them together to make a simple protein, or they get more and more and more complicated. We're going to be talking a little bit more about polymers, and I'll try and throw out a couple of examples in the notes. Again, the notes will be filled out all the way when we post them online, of man-made amino acids, man-made polymers, and natural polymers. One of the natural polymers they talked about that Mr. Westbrook taught you guys about too was the Mayans using rubber. They would make rubber, everything from shoes to rubber balls that they would play that game that I believe Mr. Westbrook taught everybody in class. Everyone today remembered Mr. Westbrook's lessons on that the Mayans would play, and it didn't turn out too well for the losing team in that one. You can go back on your Mayan lessons to check that out. Okay, I hope that was a good recap. You can see the notes behind me. I'll also take a picture of the board and post them online. Quick reminder before I sign off here, just remember, if you have not yet taken the optional extra credit, please give it a shot. It's out there online. It's linked through pacificascience.org. It's in your Google Classroom, and I emailed it home. And we have our usual Wednesday quiz, which will be posted Wednesday about 3 o'clock. And finally, our spot check this week are pages 45 and 46 from our HMB books. So please get those on in. This is one of the few weeks that I've ever actually asked you to turn in an actual physical piece of paper. So not a picture, but an actual paper coming on in from your HMB books. Have a wonderful week 11. See you online, and glad the rain has finally started. Things are looking awesome out on the field. I'll try and post a picture. Mr. Sewell was noticing how incredibly green our field looked after just one rainstorm, which is awesome. And so we're going to hopefully get some more rain as the winter goes. Have a great day, and I'll see you online. Bye-bye.